Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, bringing you this week's Living the Shift, which I've been away from for several weeks. So I'm glad to be back, except that in the several weeks, Facebook has changed their things again. So I'm way late on doing this. And I am even looking for, let's see, I might just start doing this straight from Zoom like we do our Ascended World on Monday mornings, because this has just sort of gotten a little crazy. They change the layout all the time, and then I'm like, well, I'm trying to get on, and it was funny because it wasn't letting me, and I was like, well, what did I forget? And I had to change a setting. It was very bizarre. Anyway, I'm putting this up here so I can see chats on my phone, any kind of comments. So the truth changes, and that's the funniest thing. That's funny that we're talking about that today, right? So I wanted to talk about, actually I wanted to just title it The Fluidity of Truth, but then I thought I might get, zinged and edited and censored, as things happen to happen these days. But it is a really good topic and very important one for us to check into on a regular basis. Because what happens is we get to a place where we, believe we have, a certain truth. We believe, a certain truth is a foundation of who we are. We attach our ego to it, and then we never go back and check it, right? So, but the thing is, truth is absolutely fluid. It is malleable. It changes constantly. So there is nothing that is, undeniable, except that we're all part of this huge universal multiversal consciousness, right? And things are changing all the time. So when we talk about Sarah says, truth changes as we evolve or expand. Exactly. That's the point. So what we consider truth is what the ego considers truth, right? And the ego says, this is how I define things. This is what I did. This is what I did. This is the experience I had. This was the outcome. Therefore, I'm going to create my hypothesis, my definitions from that experience. It's what I saw everybody else do. I saw 100 people do. That's what we're doing all the time. We're categorizing and defining and saying things like, I see all these other people doing this, so therefore that must be the truth, right? It's there are so many things and jokes and memes out there today that talk about things like this. What is a lie that's been told like 100 different times becomes the truth. And that's really what we've come to. It's giving me some error message today, and I'm hoping, it looks like I'm still going through here. I think I might just have to do this through Zoom every week. It might be easier. But anyhow, the thing is, that's what happens. Like, we have 100 people that say something, and then all of a sudden it's the truth. We have 1,000 people who say something, and then it's undeniably the truth, right? And then, like I have this conversation so often with many people. And so what often is the conversation has to do with, consciousness versus science, right? What we define as consciousness versus science. And in reality, it's this, okay, well, which comes first? And I've done whole podcasts on this, on the whole, which comes first, consciousness or science? Because really, for us to be conscious of something is for us then to create a rule around it, which is then ego joining in. And I'm still getting this error message, and I'm still going. So the thing is, like, so in conscious, when I've talked about in consciousness, like, well, we have this idea, we have this concept, we have this perception that comes in, and then we try to replicate. And then if we have it a certain amount of times, then it becomes our truth. Oh, then this is what it is. This is what a molecule is. This is what an atom is. Then it becomes science. And then when we say it's science, it's undeniably true and it cannot change, except until our consciousness then changes it. And then we create this other, this other path that creates a new rule and a new definition by the mind and the ego. So what's interesting is like I know someone who is very, she's actually a scientist. She actually manages a lab, a biochemical lab, and she has played in her consciousness practice. She has played with, okay, what if I make this do this? Okay, can I make this do this? Because it doesn't say it can do this in, like, say, the biology books, the biochemistry books. So I'm gonna see if intention changes it. And she's done it a number of times, right? So, well, how do you put that into the biology book, right? Oh, well, our biology is actually, and that's what we're starting to catch up with quantum physics. Our biology is fluid to our conscious thought and directed creation. And wow, that sort of blows a lot of stuff out of the water. So, like, when we talk about it that way, we can see it very easily. But when we talk about our truths as we know them and as we function from them, we have a very challenging time seeing that within ourselves, right? And that even also happens as we expand in consciousness, right? So one of the things that brought me to this is I was thinking about for 2 weeks, for a week and a half, I was away. I was holding a retreat, and we had so many things that we talked about. Sarah and I talked about some stuff on Monday in our Ascended World, and I was like, well, what's one that keeps on coming up? And that was one this is one that sort of the way our truths change and our truth is changing was an important topic. And, one of the things is there was a group session that we did where I saw, there was someone who was stuck out there in the ethers, and then they said, well, I'm stuck and I keep on going over the same path over and over. And I know I'm ready to move forward and I'm sort of limited. And so what can I do? And it was like, okay, well, let's take it one step at a time. And as we stepped on each, it was like a stone or a cobblestone or whatever, each stone in the path, it would be like, okay, well, and I'd say, well, okay, I was going to say, well, what's this? And she would say, this crystalline pool of, opalescent light and liquid. And I'm like, and it's a puddle. And she was like, yeah. And then we moved on to another thing, and it was like, what is this? This is grand being with vessels of life and, and elemental integration. And I'm like, and it's a tree. And she was like, yeah. So the thing was, and then we moved through all this, and every time she did that, like, and accepted that part of it, right, she got like this sort of like a gemstone. It was almost like it became like a video game. And I love that whole alliteration because we all do this. We all do this, especially as we get into consciousness. So we say, all right, I have this truth. And first we go from this place of complete logical, ego-based, mind-based truth, right? This is my definition. This has been my experience. This is what the experience of those around me have been. And so this is what must be truth. And that's what undeniably it is, right? So we go from that to our consciousness and our expanded consciousness knocking on our shoulder and saying, yeah, so let's look at that a little bit, right? Let's get a little bit more, let's expand beyond that. What if your perspective changed to this? What if you saw it from this perspective? What if you started to see it in a more holographic fashion? And then we let go of the dependence on those definitions, then to create new ones for ourselves. And then we start talking about fluidity. And sometimes what happens, like what I was talking about in this experience, and it's happened to me, it's happened to all of us who are on the active spiritual journey kind of thing, is at some point we become very enchanted. It's very enchanting when we start to remember what the universe is in such a much more multidimensional fashion. And we can see how like other dimensions feed into this one, how the presentation in this dimension is like connected into such a much bigger network of consciousness and all that kind of stuff. And then what happens often is we become so enchanted with that, and we're like, oh, that's more important. That's more important to be connected into that. And we sometimes lose a little bit of connection to this. And I actually went through that. I realized over the past decade, I realized that this year, as I had done that with my physical body. And I got into a place where I honored my body And I lived in a healthy way overall. And yet what happened was I discarded it. In a way, I discarded it because I was so concerned and so focused in the non-physical that I forgot that the physical is actually still a part of the hologram. And I was just like, yeah, that's great, because I see things in energy more than I see them in physicality. But it doesn't mean that the physicality is not part of the definition of my truth. So that's the thing that I was missing. So then I realized one day, I had gained a whole bunch of weight over the past 10 years. And then I was like, oh, well, the message was, okay, it's time to be done with this. And the thing was, to be done with it was for me to see it as it was and say, oh, well, I was really disconnected from my body in a way that I didn't realize I was. And the funny part is I've been working out and I eat healthy and everything else, but it was like literally this physical disconnection of, that's not important. That's just there. I'm just going to use it as my puppet, and I'm going to go ahead and focus on my energy over here. Well, then I was forgetting that there's a truth that's presented here in my physical body that I wasn't paying attention to. So my body was getting heavier and heavier to pull me in, to anchor me in, to say, hey, don't forget, we're living here. We have a piece of our consciousness here. Until I finally said, oh yeah, I was so heavy. It was so heavy that I just couldn't even, really get to it. So that was the whole, and basically like that, it was easy to shift. And then it changed my entire perspective of what I'm connected to, and almost like a big rush, right? It changed this entire perspective of what I'm connected to in the physical, through my physical body, as well as through my non-physical expanded consciousness. And that expanded my truth. It didn't limit it. And that's what happens is we start to have these then perceptions that doing certain things are limited, that if I focus too much on my body, I'm being very limited in 3D. And we say 3D like it's a curse, like it's a bad thing, except that we all desire to be here, else we wouldn't be. And we all have a deep desire to be here because we love the physicality. We love the separation, and we love the density, and we love the creation within it. We love how we create within it, right? So there is the variability in our truth. And if we stop seeing all of those pieces and we only see parts of them, so if we're only living in the 3D and we're not living in our expanded consciousness, then we're limiting ourselves. If we're only living in the expanded consciousness and we're not living in the physical 3D, then we're limiting ourselves. We don't think we are, right? And the ego tells us, "Oh yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine because it's so much more fun to be an illustrious pool of crystalline reflection or whatever, It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see the expanded universe. It's beautiful to remember it and be like, oh yeah, we created all of this, and that all feeds into this in the presentation. But then what we are limiting ourselves with is then shutting out this part. So it's like saying, I see this cube, right? And I think the cube is wonderful. Except I think this side over here and this side over here, that those aren't important. Or this side back here isn't important. So then it collapses its dimensionality. It collapses its multidimensionality and collapses it into another dimension to make it 2D and make it a square. Versus a cube, which then loses our perspective on that there's a perspective around the whole thing, and it's just a perspective from the front. See what I'm saying? So that's what we do with all of this stuff. So now is the time to accept this is my truth as it is in this moment. Okay? This is where I am today. The truth is, as Sarah said in the beginning, truth changes as we evolve or expand. That absolutely, that is the case. What my truth is today is very different than it was 3 weeks ago or 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was a completely different person and in ways that I can't even explain. So, it's funny because I've had multiple people say, you're so different. Like you're just, and they can't even put their finger on it. It's like, yeah, I know. Because I've accepted other aspects of myself, other pieces of the hologram that I wasn't even being conscious of missing within myself, right? And so I had to create these situations to reflect them back to me in a way that was catalytic, let's just say, and has been uncomfortable and everything else because the ego didn't really want to look at it. But then once I looked at it, I was like, well, if I don't judge it and I just look at it as the hologram, well, God, that's beautiful and incredible and so multi-dimensional and faceted. But it was the judgment I had to get through. So it's the things that we're hiding and denying of ourselves, the things that we're denying by saying this is not my truth, right? And we're judging it because we believe it's not truth. That's where we're denying ourselves a conscious expansion into this remembrance and what we want to call enlightenment or whatever, ascension. That's all about accepting our wholeness, all about the wholeness. And Sarah and I have been talking about that in Ascended World. We're doing that this month in our Wonderland program. It's the 7th course is being launched this month, tomorrow actually. And it's on self-love and self-nourishment. And really what that comes down to is wholeness. Because to come to unconditional self-love is to really embrace all of ourselves. And that's including the shadow. And it's coming around to the worthiness and the trust and our guidance. And this is why guidance, by the way, is more getting attuned to our inner guidance and our expanded consciousness is far more of a priority than what we see on paper in front of us, right? Or what others tell us, or what the media tells us, or what our neighbors tell us, or what our institutions and our doctors tell us. Far more important is what our guidance tells us, and to get attuned to that, because it is going to continue to be and expand beyond what the mind can even comprehend, because we're pulling in stuff now in the hologram that we haven't even considered or blinded ourselves to while we've been embodied in the past. And so that's changing the hologram. It's changing the truth. And it's going to continue to change, as my understanding, exponentially. Look at what we have as truth today in our society that we did not have 2 years ago. I remember, and Sarah and I had to really dig for this, that we finally came across it, but there was an Ascended World that we were talking about pre-COVID days, talking about the concept of being a prisoner in your home, being a prisoner in your body, being a prisoner, whatever. And that was before, and we talked about being, like prisoner in your home. And then it was almost like, that was like months before then the whole COVID thing. Well, you know what? Nobody would have ever accepted that. You know what truth is? In a couple of months, the whole world is going to shut down to the point that people can barely go to the store. You'd been like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, like, look at what's around you. That's ridiculous, right? Look at how our truths have changed. Look at how our lives have changed in terms of how we go out, how people work, right? So many more work from home now, or part from home and have a much more fluid kind of schedule and presentation of where they're doing their work. So many have a much different presentation of what their life looks like. And that's just one small thing, and it is one small thing. You might not think it is, but it really is. So think of how easily our whole reality, our whole truth changed. So that the key is to accept that this is my truth today, and I'm going to allow the fluidity of my truth to change and evolve as I change and evolve, because that's okay. The foundations of our beliefs change from day to day. And my understanding again is that they're just gonna accelerate. So, we never go back. Often we don't go back and say, okay, these are the foundations. Even those of us who are doing this conscious spiritual work, we say, oh, well, I've developed this. I've developed this whole understanding. And this is it. And I'm going to defend it to the death, even if it doesn't align with where I'm evolving to, because it might have evolved past there, but that's what got me this huge step forward. And so I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to leave it as it is, because I believe to honor that and to create my identity from where I am moving forward, I have to use that as my foundation instead of that was my foundation, and I am so thankful for it, for showing up in the way it did, and now it's evolving and changing and expanding. So that's, for example, the practice of Trinity Energy Progression, which is a practice that I originated, is a consciousness spiritual energy practice that started in one place and has continually evolved. It's a much different practice today than it was it's going to be 10 years in January, 10 years ago. It's a very completely different practice. And yet there's funny because you have a lot of energy practices and spiritual practices out there that have the same book, the same thing that they've used. I'm continually evolving the manual to that practice. I'm continually evolving the practice itself and how it's done and all that kind of stuff because we are evolving. So there's no reason why would, like, we honor things that have that have been around for, thousands of years. And yet, like, because we think that that's more important than something that's been around for, 10 years. And it's like, but no, because we change constantly. So yes, the foundation of understanding is so important. Yeah, because it helps us to take steps up in our evolution and then use that and say, okay, let me look at that and compare it to where I am today. And does that still hold true? Are there things that are aligning now that are showing me differently, that are showing me something different to expand or edit my foundational understandings with so that it expands me beyond today? What I have always said through what I've taught and believed and understood is any kind of belief system, any kind of foundational understanding is fine, is perfect, is wonderful. We always talk about what's better and what's worse and stuff. It's like any belief system, any spiritual system, any consciousness system, anything is perfect as long as it helps you to expand your consciousness and evolve. And the day it starts to limit you is the day for you to look to go beyond it. No judgment, but that's where we get stuck, because what happens is people get like a belief system and they go into a belief system and they commit themselves to this belief system and they're doing it for years and like, oh, well, I can never learn enough and da-da-da. Well, then one day, like they might have gone beyond. There might be things about them that don't align with that belief system anymore. But because their parents did it, their grandparents did it, they're going to go to they're going to stay with this belief system. They're going to stay in the parameters and limitations of this belief system because that's what they've always done, versus, okay, I'm going to take the basis of this understanding of the things that really jive with me, and I'm going to take it forward into what I'm going to evolve into. And I honor that and thank it for having had that. And now I'm going to expand into what's even more of my truth right now. And right now. And right now. Because if we didn't, we stop evolving. If we don't, we stop evolving. And then we get stuck in an effort of proving ourselves right and wrong to justify the way we feel, right? Even if it doesn't align with us and where we are today, it's like, no, it justifies that I stay with this belief system because this means that I'm right and you're wrong. Instead of, does my foundational understanding, has that changed and evolved? And does yours introduce anything to me that might expand my hologram? I love saying, look at everybody's belief system. Look at all different kinds of belief systems and consider all of them and say, what in it is the nugget? What is the golden nugget in there for me? I start to look at commonalities. I have looked at so many different belief systems and spiritual understandings and teachings and all that kind of stuff. And the key is not what the differences are, right? The key is, where are the commonalities? And that means that we have a common foundation, right? And from that common foundation, there's all these different parameters and specifics, and most of them are all cultural or, based on a time and place that it's often long gone. Instead of saying, okay, the semantics are the semantics or were the semantics, so what is the meaning behind this, and does this have a golden nugget for me, right? And then check in with your truth. Is this my truth? These are the things that we forget to do, or we say we do them, or we do them for a period of time, and I'm like, nope, I've got my truth, I'm good. And anytime you try to fight my truth, I am going to get defensive, I'm going to get egotistical, and I'm going to, defend it and debate it to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. One of the things that we joked about, and it was a great thing. We have to create a meme for it, that we talked about in the retreat I just held, was, my righteousness honors your wrongness. Because we talk about how, we're all right, we all have our own truth and da-da-da. But then when, we hit something that is foundational to us that we don't want to change or the ego wants to defend, we get sort of righteous about it. And then, we could, we'd say, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, but you're wrong, right? And I'm so spiritual and you're not, or you're not as spiritual as I am, that's the thing. And we don't say that, but we think it. So that was the joke every time, like somebody started getting a little, or we all did. It was like, oh, my righteousness honors your wrongness. Because that's basically what we do in many cases. So, the key is to really just have humor about it, right? I laugh at myself all the time I check in all the time. That is my commitment. I check in all the time on what is my truth today. What is my truth today? And what is, because when we start looking at the things that are changing, instead of denying them and pushing them away, then we can pull in golden nuggets that add to our hologram and add to the facets of our beautiful gemstone that we are. And the key is it's the same for everyone. So no matter where they are in the journey is not for us to judge in our righteousness on their wrongness, right? It is for us to get to this place of acceptance and open-mindedness to say, so where's the nugget in this for me? Even if we are vehemently in opposition of understanding. Laurel says it's always fun to tell people you're okay with agreeing to disagree. People get so stuck in the duality. You're right. I do that all the time. I'll just be like, okay, I guess we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And it just stops the conversation dead, right? Because then there's no argument. I'm like, okay, yeah, we just agree to disagree. Well, that's right, because okay, yep. You lose that battle because, the ego's like, let's battle. I want to defend that foundation of truth. I want to defend my truth. Because I want to show you I'm right and you're wrong, my righteousness honors your wrongness. So that's the thing to look at within yourself, right? Look at what is it that I've been defending that instead I might want to look at with a different perspective and add the other things that are around me and as possibilities and say, does that change my picture at all? Because to me, that's the fun of our constant evolution of remembrance, right? And we're pulling away these things of separation. And when we start really seeing things from the variability of the multiverse and that we all have our own creative realities, then we start being able to say, well, my truth and your truth are so different, and yet they're truths. There are truths based on our experiences, our individual journeys, which is what we desire to do when we decided to embody this piece of our consciousness into an individual. Because the individuality and the exploration of the ego is that separation and duality and the concept of a me and not me, which means that you could have a different journey than me. And it can be true and it can be right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's almost 8 billion people on this planet now. And so 8 billion ways we have split up our consciousness that has been embodied here on the physical planet, on top of, that's only as humans, and that's not even counting all the animals and the fairy realm and the elements and all things conscious, right? How we've split up that hologram. And all the journeys are perfect. They fit into the bigger symphony. And yet my journey and a praying mantis's journey is very different in representation right now, except I'm the praying mantis as well, except right now I am experiencing me embodied as me. So that's a big discussion for another day, and it's sort of mind-blowing. But when we start looking at it that way, it's like, well, why would we want the symphony to be flat? Why would we want the cube to be just a square? I mean, there is a use for a square, but we also see the beauty of the cube. And then we see the beauty of sacred geometry and multidimensionality. And then it's like, oh, like where I started seeing, things that are represented in, say, what we call the fairy realm or other dimensions, and how they're represented here. And when you can see the connection and see the hologram in a different way, it does become beautiful. So expansive and incredibly breathtakingly beautiful. And also, the key is to also remember the physicality, the puddle and the tree that we created here, because that's beautiful too. And it's not plain, and it's not just 3D. It is beautiful in the senses we created and the experience of it that we created to have in this particular part of the dimensionality and separation and forgetfulness. So when we remember and we can see through all of it, it actually enhances our truth. It enhances our experience. And it enhances the fact that we know we are infinite creators in all directions. And look at the beauty of that. Look at the beauty of all of those individual journeys that make this beautiful picture of what we call Gaia. So much to consider. So look at that, on the basis this week is look at where you might be, you might want to just look at the foundation. I mean, look, even waking up in the morning and saying, I'm human, I'm physical. I'm this, I am that. I am is a truth that we decide to accept for ourselves. It's a definition. I am whatever. I am heavy, I am thin, I am pretty, I am ugly, I am smart, I am dumb, I am gifted, I'm not. I am blah, blah, blah. I'm sick, I'm healthy. Think of all the things we think to ourselves. I'm old, I'm young, I'm tired, right? All the things we say to ourselves, I am, and there's a reality and truth that we create for ourselves constantly and then reinforce them constantly. Start with those and say, what if I change that today? What if I said I'm vibrant and young? What if I said I am brilliant and cunning and expansive? And what if we start changing that? Well, then our truths start to change, and then watch it all fall into to creation around us. Because when we create our truths, we are creating our truths. When we reinforce our truths, we further create them, and when we change them, then we create new ones. Sometimes we call that lying, which is something that I've been looking at in doing these courses that Sarah and I have been doing. It's like funny how when we start looking at them, as a tool, it's like, well, it's just it's a creative creation, creative truthing. Creative truthing, there's a new term. But there's things behind it. There are things to look at. That's a discussion on a different day. But it's like, okay, so it's just so can we have 8 billion different truths? Absolutely. We have way more than that. We have billions, trillions, quadrillions, gajillions, as I call it. An infinite amount of truths that we create in this creation of separation and duality. And that's when we allow them all to come together, that we see that beauty of the symphony in the hologram that we've created. So on that, I'm going to let you go on that small thought. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter signing off with this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.